about what the Pentagon is doing in this direction. And keep in mind, I say that as someone, I didn't love the excesses of the DEI programs they put in place. I live with them out in the Seattle-King County area. I think there were a lot of mistakes behind that. But instead of addressing that in a sensible way, we've decided to go at it with a right-wing cultural war, with a sort of right-wing cultural revolution that frankly would make Chairman Mao proud. We are banning books, we are pulling images down off of the website, leading to some just sort of ridiculous things. There was, of course, the instance when all reference to the Enola Gay disappeared for a few days. Now that's kind of funny because in that context, gay means something different. But why do we care if the word gay that means homosexual is printed somewhere? Why is that threatening to us? Why are we spending time on that instead of, I don't know, giving us a budget that might have been more productive? And then we're pulling books off the shelves, which led to one really amusing outcome where someone said in one particular library within the Pentagon, you could not find a copy of Jackie Robinson's biography. That had been pulled. But you could find 2 copies of Mein Kampf. So it's interesting, I guess, well, you got to have 2 because if one's checked out, somebody needs something to do. Why are we doing that? And now we've got the changes to the names. And this changing the names of ships, going back to the original names of the Confederacy for all of our military bases, a lot of different things can be said about this, but I just want to close by drawing one particular contrast, and that's about Medgar Evers, who is actually a personal hero of mine. I read his wife's book when I was a freshman in college, and it inspired me. My son's middle name is Evers. We are talking about pulling Medgar Evers' name off of a ship. Now, this is a man who served in the military, but also he stood up to Jim Crow, white supremacy, and racism in the South. And I know we're focused on the warrior ethos. If you don't think that it took a warrior ethos to do that in Mississippi in the 1950s and the 1960s, then you're just not paying attention. Why are we having this conversation? And Mr. Secretary, your summary of the problem, where you said that basically the problem with DEI is there just aren't enough trannies from Brooklyn or lesbians from San Francisco who want to join the 82nd Airborne. Not only do the trannies and lesbians not join, but those very same ads turn off the young, patriotic Christian men who have traditionally filled our ranks. We can go after the extremes of DEI without denigrating and insulting people, and by the way, leaving out the Jews, apparently, why we're putting that group in there. Because the thing is, the insulting, belittling language aside, you're right. There aren't enough trannies in Brooklyn or lesbians in San Francisco to fill the military. There also aren't enough, what's the word here, young, patriotic Christian men who remind us of John Wayne to fill the military either. We are a diverse nation. We need to be inclusive. And we need to not actively insult people who don't happen to fit our preconceived notion of what a member of the military should look like. So we're at a situation now where the military is denigrating Medgar Evers, who died standing up for the values that I think are central to our country. One of the things I love about the military is service above self. I mean, it's such an important message that everyone who serves there says that. No one I can think of personifies that more than Medgar Evers. Instead, we're going to go back to renaming the bases after the Confederates. Now, I know, apparently you spent a lot of time finding other names that applied to people who actually did serve this country honorably, but President Trump, just was it yesterday, 2 days ago now, down at Fort Bragg, when he blatantly politicized the United States military, sort of, as they like to say, said the quiet part out loud, that those bases are being renamed for the Confederates. So we honor white supremacist, slave-owning insurrectionists who lost, by the way, they're losers, instead of Medgar Evers. Can we please just stop and get back to the business of treating everybody equally and with respect? A fear of a left-wing cultural revolution is not solved by launching a right-wing cultural revolution. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I thank the ranking member. And now I'd like to introduce our witnesses, all before us for the first time. General Caine, have you been before the committee before?
No, sir.
I didn't think so. Well, welcome. Glad to have you. First, we have the Honorable Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense. We have General Dan Caine, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And accompanying our witnesses is Ms. Bryn McDonald, Acting DoD Comptroller, who is here to assist in answering our questions. Welcome. First, we'll start with you, Ms. Secretary. You're recognized.
Well, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in full support of President Trump's proposed fiscal year 2026 budget for the Department of Defense. I'm honored to testify today alongside General Dan Caine, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Bryn McDonald, who's performing the duties of DoD's Comptroller and Chief Financial Officer. We are very proud to represent and serve our warriors and their families. And today, as they do every day, they're keeping America safe. They're defending our homeland. They're standing up to communist China. They're working hand in glove with our allies and partners. They are achieving peace through strength. I'd like to start today by thanking this committee and Congress for your bipartisan leadership to give our troops a big pay raise in 2025. This included an additional 10.5% raise for our junior enlisted service members, E1 to E4. Thank you also for supporting other initiatives that improve the quality of life for our warriors and their families. With a focus on our troops and their loved ones, we have directed additional actions that will further improve their quality of life. These include making historic investments in this budget to improve living conditions in barracks and base housing, reforming the PCS process to reduce the cost and stress of moves for military families, and improving the quality of the care provided by our defense healthcare system. The best part of our job is meeting and interacting with troops and their families. We hear their concerns. I know how it feels to face these challenges. I've been there recently. Each of these initiatives responds to feedback we have received from the force. We will keep listening and keep looking for ways to improve their quality of life. Under President Trump's leadership, this budget puts America first and gives our warriors what they need. The $961 billion budget request, more than $1 trillion in total for national security, ends 4 years of chronic underinvestment in our military. Now, as is customary with first-year administration budget releases, additional time was necessary to implement this president's initiatives. In the last 4 months, we've moved quickly to reverse course after 4 years of weakness and mismanagement. In that 8% exercise, we found nearly $30 billion in savings across the department, which we reinvested. We killed wasteful programs, targeted bureaucratic excess, and redirected funding from Biden-era priorities to President Trump's priorities. Working with the Department of Homeland Security, we have increased border security. We reduced China's malign influence in our hemisphere. We defended freedom of navigation in the Red Sea. However, we still have a lot of work ahead of us to achieve peace through strength, a lot of deferred maintenance to catch up on. To carry out the president's mission, we have set 3 priorities for the department: restore the warrior ethos, rebuild our military, and reestablish deterrence. First, we are restoring the warrior ethos. President Trump charged me to focus relentlessly on warfighting, lethality, meritocracy, standards, and readiness, and that is exactly what we've done since day one. We are refocusing on what is truly important, which is warfighting and our warriors, sweeping away distractions and bureaucracy. We are setting standards that are high, equal, and unwavering. DEI is dead. We replaced it with a colorblind, gender-neutral, merit-based approach. Our force is responding incredibly to these changes. Because of President Trump and his America First priorities, recruitment and retention under this administration are higher than they've been in decades. Historic numbers of young Americans are putting on the uniform and raising their right hand because they believe in the leadership they see. This budget provides a historic level of funding for military readiness, putting our warfighters and their needs first. Second, we are rebuilding our military. 25 years ago, our military was unchallenged. Yet we squandered that advantage as China carried out an unprecedented military buildup. President Trump, as he did in his first term, is correcting those mistakes. And we're doing this by, as was mentioned multiple times, reviving our defense industrial base, reforming our acquisitions process and working with Congress to do so, and rapidly fielding emerging technologies and new weapons so our warfighters can meet the challenges of an evolving nature of warfare. This budget invests $25 billion in Golden Dome for America, a down payment on President Trump's priority to defend our homeland. It also commits more than $62 billion to modernize and sustain our nuclear forces as we face rising nuclear dangers. The budget allocates $3.5 billion for the F-47, the world's first sixth-generation air superiority fighter. The budget will also revitalize our shipbuilding industrial base with $6 billion in funding in FY26, bringing it to $47 billion in total we request for shipbuilding, after neglect from the previous administration. The budget also significantly increases funds to buy next-generation technologies that we need now and into the future: autonomous systems, long-range drones, long-range fires, and hypersonics. We will put these capabilities in the hands of our military. These steps will help us remain the strongest and most lethal fighting force in the world for generations to come. And third, we are reestablishing deterrence. When an opponent sees our well-equipped and tough-as-nails warriors, they will decide that today is not the day to test U.S. resolve. Credible deterrence starts at home. It starts with securing our borders. We will achieve 100% operational control of our southern border, and to that end, illegal crossings under the Trump administration have decreased 99.9%. The Indo-Pacific is our priority theater, and China is our pacing threat. That's why I've traveled to the Indo-Pacific twice already to visit our forces and meet with allies and partners. As we shift our focus to the Indo-Pacific, President Trump looks to our allies and partners to be force multipliers alongside the United States, and we are making progress on those fronts. We applaud allies who are stepping up, but others need to do more, and they need to do it quickly. And at the NATO Heads of State meeting later this month, we expect our NATO allies to commit to 5% of GDP on defense and defense-related investments, something that was almost inconceivable before President Trump led the charge in his first administration and continues in this one. As the President has rightly pointed out, it is only fair that our allies and partners do their part. We can't want their security more than they do. The Department of Defense is executing a common-sense agenda to achieve peace through strength. The threats we face are serious. Our investments to counter them must also be. That's what this budget does. It matches capabilities to threats. While we long for peace, we prepare for war, and we must overcome decades of neglect and decline. We must fortify our position as the world's most lethal fighting force, and that means acting fast as our opponents are. This committee is our critical partner in everything we do, and we appreciate your leadership and oversight. We look forward to accomplishing these goals, to achieving peace through strength, to supporting our warriors, to protecting our citizens and our taxpayers. Together with you, may God grant us the wisdom to see what is right and the courage to do it. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary. General Caine, you're recognized for 5 minutes to summarize your opening statement.
Chair Rogers, thank you, sir. Ranking Member Smith, other members of the committee, I'm honored to join the Secretary here today and Ms. Bryn McDonald to appear before you to testify on the President's FY26 budget. Today's hearing reflects our shared commitment to maximize efficiency, accountability, and lethality and survivability through the investments that you make in us. Ensuring every expenditure increases the survivability of the joint force and providing our warfighters the advanced capabilities, cutting-edge technologies required to dominate our adversaries at scale. I've got deep gratitude for everyone in this room and your commitment to helping us deliver the capability and capacity of our joint force and the 2.8 million service members, civilians, and their families to help us deliver the peace through strength that the Secretary talked about is very important, and I'm very thankful. It's my responsibility as chairman to understand the global situation, integrate the joint force to confront and manage risk worldwide, and ultimately advise our leaders. This demands a comprehensive understanding across every domain: land, sea, air, cyber, space, undersea, and all military services in every region of the globe, and frankly, all time horizons. It also requires making hard, informed decisions, which we advise on, in order to prioritize the finite taxpayer dollars that we have to ensure the greatest impact and capability for our joint warfighters across the globe. The President's budget enables the joint force to defend our great nation from adversaries seeking to do us harms. We are relentless in our pursuit of innovation and technology that allows us to deter and, if need be, win the wars of the future at every opportunity, while ensuring that we learn from the battlefields of the past and position ourselves for the battlefields of the future. This budget empowers the joint force to get after the Secretary's 3 pillars, as he just talked about: restoring the warrior ethos, rebuilding our military, and reestablishing our deterrence, and ensures our joint force is properly armed, globally integrated, and ready while doing our #1 job of protecting our homeland. The President's budget invests in our warfighters. As I said, to win on the battlefields of the future, we've got to be properly armed with the right capabilities, lethal, modern, reliable, and survivable at scale. Victory requires people and platforms that overmatch the enemy, systems that work together in the harshest conditions, and technologies that give our warfighters an advantage at the tactical edge. The budget gives us necessary tools to reinvigorate our national and defense industrial base. Our nation is full of incredible entrepreneurial talent, and we need every bit of it to support the increasing demands of the warfighters. This budget also helps the joint force become more globally integrated. I think of us as relationship entrepreneurs in the joint force, not only working together in the military, but working with our allies and partners, the interagency, industry, and of course Congress before crisis begins and before conflict comes upon us. Finally, the President's budget reflects our mandate to stay ready, always be on the account, anticipating the next fight and getting out in front of it so that we're best prepared for our warfighters and their families. The most important component of our joint force is our people. This budget makes meaningful investments in our service members and their families, improving the quality of life of our service members, medical care, and things important to them like the moving process. As I mentioned, our people are the most important part of this, and it's an honor every day for me to serve alongside some of the most extraordinary warriors, civilian teammates, and families our nation has ever known. I assure this committee that the force remains ready, capable to defend this nation, but we've got some work to do. With your continued support and prudent investment, we will maintain our competitive edge, strengthen our advantage, and ensure that our men and women in uniform are equipped with the right capability. I also remain thoughtful of those currently deployed right now and their families, who stand the watch around the world, quietly serving to do our nation's work so that we can be here in this room right now. And I also hold a special remembrance for our fallen and their families, who continue to show us every day what real courage and tenacity looks like. I thank the Congress and this committee for your support and collaboration in our shared commitment to deliver peace through strength. I look forward to your questions, and again, I'm honored to be here.
I thank the witnesses, and I now recognize myself for the first questions. Secretary Hegseth, you know, you've talked with me about this. We both know the President has a peace through strength agenda, and he's serious about it. And as I have talked to you about this, we are at the lowest level of defense spending as a nation in 80 years. And that has got to change. And I think that you and the President have sent a strong signal about wanting to get after that and change it with this year's proposed spending that includes the reconciliation package, which will put us over $1 trillion. It's a great first step. But as you and I both know, it's a 1 year. We're going to have to see continued funding, in my opinion, and growth in that top line in the out years. Do you share that opinion?
Well, Mr. Chairman, the baseline of our planning process for FY26 was working with our partners in OSD and the COCOMs and elsewhere, identifying the threats that exist, the priorities of the administration, and what we need to spend to make sure we have those capabilities. And that was a reorientation from the previous approach of the previous administration. So that included exercises where we looked at reductions, where we could reinvest those into different priorities. So when you look at the two bills in one budget that add up to $961 billion and over $1 trillion, truly a historic investment, 13% increase, that was our statement to the president of what we think we need in order to spend and invest in ways that are postured for now and into the future. And what I would commit to you and to this committee is that in FY27 and 28 and 29, in this administration, we will perform the same exercise, knowing that threats, we believe that the policies of this administration will lead to peace and more opportunities. But as our adversaries continue to increase their capabilities and we learn about what's happening on the battlefield, that will lead to commensurate increases in ours. So we anticipate through that review that there probably will be increases, but I wouldn't put a number to it in the future.
Thank you. I just share the president's commitment that every NATO member nation should reach 5% of its GDP, and that includes us. And I think we can do it by the end of this president's term, and I'm determined to help him get there. Secretary Hegseth, at the president's direction, you're developing a plan on reforms of DoD acquisition. Just so happens we are too. You may have heard of the SPEED Act. It's a bipartisan, bicameral effort. As you develop your plan, what problems have you identified with acquisition reform that need attention?
Well, our new A&S, Undersecretary for A&S, was just confirmed. Mike Duffy, he's doing a fantastic job. He's diving right into this to include the SPEED Act, which we're reviewing in real time, that identifies a lot of the same problems we have. Streamlining processes, consolidating. We need competition and actual new entrants into acquisitions in a stale process. It's too bureaucratic. There are too many gatekeepers. Too many programs are gold-plated, which add to cost overruns, and they're late to need. So throughout the entire process, we've reached out to industry and to innovators and to outside-the-box thinkers and said, what would you do? How have you looked at this problem? To include this committee, how would you attack this so that we can get what we need in the hands of warfighters faster? It's unacceptable in this real-time world we live in, where you've got off-the-shelf and off-the-shelf capabilities and open architecture opportunities, and you can do virtual design of products and that you don't have to build a hard copy, that we're not doing it faster. So everything necessary we want, and we're going as fast as we can.
Great, thank you. General Caine, as you know, there's been a lot of dialogue around here about selling off some of our spectrum. Can you talk to us about the importance of preserving the spectrum around the lines that the DoD uses?
You bet, sir. Spectrum is a critical part of our warfighting enablers, and as the administration and the Congress carefully consider the slices that we must preserve, there are certain areas within that my military advice to the Secretary and others is to hang on to that. I'm grateful that the Deputy has been really leading this effort with the Congress and to sort of measure risk. I understand that economic security is also national security, so the truth is always somewhere in the middle, but there are some segments in the lower end that frankly, I would strongly recommend we preserve and protect for defense matters.
I raise that because I want you to know we're going to be taking our cues from you, and if you're against it, I'm going to be against it. With that, I'll yield my time, or yield back and recognize the ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on the budget point, I made this point before the committee before. The House just passed a budget that adds nearly $3 trillion to an already out-of-control debt. So if we do really want to spend money on defense or anywhere else, we ought to be willing to pay for it. And I certainly go back through generations of, bipartisan problems with this. You can't have a debt that size and keep coming back talking about how much money you're going to spend, whether it's defense or whatever your priorities are. And Mr. Secretary, you said the 99% down on border crossings and the border is secure. At the same time, we're going to take $1 billion out of the MILCON budget, out of building barracks, to send it for the border, and there's another 4,000 troops that we're planning on sending down to the border. Given that the border is secure, might you rethink that spending?
Well, sir, we are securing it. It is secure, but it's a manpower-intensive effort at the beginning.
Two different words there. It's either secure or secure, and it sounded to me like you said it was secure.
It is secure.
Okay.
What we're continuing to do is expand that and fortify it through infrastructure, which is a big part of the budget on the Department of Homeland Security side as well. So it's that $1 billion you're talking about was from the CR in FY25. We fully fund that back and more in FY26 with a recognition that we were dealing with the world as it existed when we came in. And the previous administration said they needed new legislation to secure the border. It turns out you just needed a new president.
I would point out
president
that you
with
have
the
not
Defense Department and
submitted-
DHS that was willing to go to the border
You
and
have
actually secure it, which is what we
not submitted a budget yet. So whether or not you're putting that money back in remains to be seen. You have definitely taken it out. And I think the obsession there, and I don't disagree, the border needed to be secure. But from a pure budget standpoint, let's just not keep the political focus on that. Let's make sure that we're funding some of the other priorities that we have. So when it comes back to acquisition reform, and the chairman's point, it's our committee, certainly Congress is part of the problem. We set up a lot of requirements. Defense contractors are part of the problem. I'm curious, how would you get after reforming the culture at the Pentagon so that you can move faster, number one, and number two, how would you get after the defense contractors that push the requirements process? And specifically, what would you do about the requirements process to try to speed things up?
Well, first of all, I think gold plating is a real problem, sir. I mean, across the department.
Interesting to use the word gold in this particular context, but yes, I agree with you, actually.
We maybe could use a little bit more silver plating on occasion. A recognition that the 99% solution is oftentimes the enemy of the 85% solution that delivers 2 years sooner. And that's contractors and other companies wanting to do right, but trying to do too much and overpromise, and then they're under-delivering, and the warfighter
not always wanting to do right. In some cases, just
not
wanting,
always,
just
not
wanting
always.
to make money,
So,
but yes.
The change is also in acquisitions about people. You need reformers in these positions. I'm here to be a disruptor of those processes. Our deputy secretary has extensive business experience. The types of people we're bringing in as undersecretaries have been disruptors and innovators in the private sector who recognize that bureaucracy can be dysfunctional and needs to be disrupted. So it's taking outside-the-box unique approaches. I mean, virtual design is a big example. How many times are we going to build something physically that takes a year to build when you could use AI and computing power, design it virtually, identify the flaws, and move more quickly, or create open architecture so you can move
Our committee
systems
stands ready
between.
to work with
I mean,
you.
there's 500
One
different
final
things we can do, and we're doing them.
Yeah, and I'm sincerely concerned about this. Is it the policy of the Department of Defense that we need to be prepared to take Greenland and Panama by force if necessary? Is this a policy that you have within the Department of Defense in accordance with the President's wishes?
I heard what you said about those two countries and saying we need to worry about China. Well, we are worried about China.
That wasn't my concern.
China's malign influence in Panama.
I was
the recognition
concerned with
that if
us
China has
saying
control
that
of
using
ports
military
or
force
malign
to take
influence
another
over the
sovereign
Panama,
country's
we
territory.
should pay attention to that.
Right.
So Panama is very key terrain that we've focused on, and we've been willing to focus
So
on,
we should
as
take it.
is Greenland
We should
key
take
terrain.
it by military force. They're important. I'm not going to
Arctic-
argue with
the
that.
Arctic is
I'm
incredibly
arguing with
important,
the
and
using
adversaries are
our
trying to
military
gain-
to take it by force.
Our job at the DoD is to have plans. And
Do you have a plan for that?
Our job at the Defense Department is to have plans for any particular contingency.
Including the contingency of basically invading
Any
Denmark.
contingency you need, we've got it. We've got a building full of planners, and we're prepared to give recommendations whenever needed.
So just be clear, you have plans to take Panama and Greenland by force if necessary.
I think the American people would want the Pentagon to have plans for any particular contingency.
Not
and
for that
thankfully,
one,
we
in my
are in the
opinion.
planning business.
Speaking on behalf of the American people, I don't think the American people voted for President Trump because they were hoping we would invade Greenland. I'm going to go out on a limb on that one. I yield back.
Gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson is recognized.
Thank you very much, Chairman Mike Rogers, for your visionary leadership. And indeed, each witness, thank you for your service to America. And in particular, Mr. Secretary, your service is so appreciated, and I'm especially grateful as the son of a flying tiger who helped liberate China, as the father of 4 sons who have served in Iraq, Egypt, Italy, and Afghanistan, as a 31-year Army veteran myself. Your leadership for peace through strength is crucial, and I believe we're in a Cold War we did not choose of dictators with rule of gun invading democracies with rule of law. It began with war criminal Putin invading Ukraine on February 24, 2022, and then Iranian puppets invading Israel on October 7, 2023, with the Chinese Communist Party threatening Taiwan. President Trump tried to deter war criminal Putin in his first term with Javelin missiles to Ukraine, American troops in Poland, and stopping Nord Stream 2. But Putin ignored Trump, and defying Biden has continued his efforts. Upon election of Trump, there were hopes for peace, but Putin insulted Trump with the murderous attacks at Christmas and New Year's. Every time President Trump tries to reduce the conflict, war criminal Putin increases mass murder of drones and missile attacks on the people and civilians of Ukraine, including hospitals this week. War criminal Putin is clearly fixated to resurrect the failed Soviet Union, with troops still in Transnistria of Moldova, rigging elections in Belarus, invading the Republic of Georgia, and rigging elections against the legitimate President Salome Zurishvili of Georgia. Additionally, there have been new threats this week against the Baltic republics, our NATO allies. Every outreach by Trump has been mocked by Putin. With that in mind, an incredible achievement of President Trump is to awaken our NATO allies, now including Sweden and Finland, that with Germany pledging now 5% remarkably, and 17 of our allies now provide a larger GDP support for the people of Ukraine than the United States because of President Trump's encouragement. What is the latest status on encouraging our NATO allies of providing for peace through strength?
Thank you for the question, sir. The one thing I would take issue with is the characterization that Vladimir Putin ignored President Trump. I think Vladimir Putin paid a lot of attention to President Trump in his first term, and that's why the invasion did not happen under President Trump's watch. Instead, under the weakness and perceived weakness of Joe Biden.
Ignored and proceeded to
He paid attention
insult
under President Trump, and then when Joe Biden was in the office
it really set the stage, sadly, that if he had really appreciated what President Trump was trying to do, he wouldn't have invaded again, but whether Biden's president or not.
But to your question about Europe,
yes,
President Trump has invigorated a truly historic investment amongst NATO allies to shoulder the burden of the defense of the continent of Europe. Vladimir Putin saw what he believed to be weakness, and I believe President Trump has stood up to that by reminding our allies that they need to spend on their own defense and ensure that they're able to shoulder the burden to defend the continent. That's been a good development.
and indeed, I was grateful last February coming back from the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe and meeting with the president, and I told him how exciting it was to see our allies understand that indeed he supports Ukraine, he supports NATO and peace through strength. And General Caine, I particularly appreciate your VMI credentials of professionalism, and with that in mind, we understand that even today, the International Atomic Energy Agency has declared Iran in breach of non-proliferation agreements, and what are we doing to deter the aggression coming from Iran?
Well, sir, first I noticed in your bio that you went to that other school in Lexington, which is always hard for me to get my head around, sir.
Hey, I grew up in the holy city of Charleston. When I saw Vimis, I thought they were Citadel cadets.
Yes, sir. I'm now a joint guy, so I'll keep all those comments to myself, sir.
You're here.
You know, sir, throughout, the IAEA report is certainly troubling. The international community seems to be thinking about what they're going to do about it, and as are we watching the situation develop and carefully monitoring the report.
Gentleman's time's expired.
America's in good hands with
Gentleman
your
from Connecticut, Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, this morning, the eyes of our closest allies, UK and Australia, are on your department as a result of Undersecretary of Policy Eldridge Colby's announcement that last night that he's launching a 30-day review of the trilateral AUKUS mission. I would just note that it's not just their eyes, it's our eyes in this committee. In 2023, by a vote of 310 to a small minority, we passed the AUKUS authorities and followed up on that in terms of AUKUS investments in the billions of dollars into our submarine industrial base. Australia has reciprocated, as you know, with its own investments in our submarine industrial base. And since then, since 2023, what we've seen that the three countries working together, that we now have well over 100 Australian sailors and naval officers that have gone through joint training. I've seen them in my district at graduation ceremonies. They're joint crewing Virginia-class submarines. We also have joint U.S.-Australian submarine repair work that's happening in Guam and Hawaii. And our submarine industrial base last year delivered 2 Virginia-class attack submarines. They're the New Jersey and Iowa. This year it'll be Massachusetts and Idaho, and the year following it's going to be Arkansas and the Utah are going to be delivered during that 3-year period. General Caine, how many nuclear-powered attack submarines is in the Chinese Navy? Do you know that answer?
It's nuclear-powered attack boats. I
Yes.
mean, it's
How many attack
yes, sir.
nuclear-powered?
Many. I'll get you the
No,
number.
well, the answer is 6.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so what we've seen in the industrial base is that last year, this year, and next year, we're going to be delivering that identical number. They're building a 7th. You can check the Wall Street Journal, and you can see where that boat ended up at the bottom of the Yangtze River because of their inability to actually do the hard work of building nuclear-powered submarines, which is probably one of the most complex undertakings in really industry of any sort. Again, the Australians are investing in Perth, and so that we are going to have rotations of Virginia-class submarines that are already started to happen. Admiral Paparo testified in vocal support of AUKUS when he came before this committee just a few weeks ago. And again, I would just say, you know, there is nothing wrong with reviewing any program. We're all accountable. Anything of this magnitude certainly deserves review. But a 30-day review on a project that really took years to develop, in which this committee was instrumental in terms of in enabling. And in my opinion, China's reaction to AUKUS is the ultimate sort of endorsement of AUKUS because they hate it. And the one commitment I would ask, Mr. Secretary, is just your commitment that this committee in Congress is going to be integrally involved in whatever the review process is, because we have skin in the game, we have history, and we have allies who really are, again, issuing statements this morning. The Prime Minister of England, the Stephen Lovegrove, the Special Representatives for AUKUS, Richard Marles, putting out statements trying to reassure their countries that the U.S. is still going to follow through on this commitment. And we want that reassurance as well from you. Can you, again, give us that commitment that Congress will be involved in this review process? And I have one more follow-up question.
As it has been, Congress will be involved, but I've had an ongoing review myself. I've spent a great deal of time with Marles and Healy at the Australia and UK.
And I've been following your work
reviewing it myself.
Yes.
Secretary Colby's reviewing it.
Okay.
We know that. It's all important to make sure it fits our needs.
State
also.
Department, by the way, has skin in the game too, and they should be involved in it as well. I just want to reiterate Mr. Rogers' point and Mr. Smith's point. If we really care about strengthening the industrial base, we need to have procurement stability, which means we need to have a budget, a real budget, not a $20 billion shipbuilding budget, which Senator Wicker just eviscerated a couple of days ago. That's $17 billion less than the last Biden shipbuilding budget. That's what got sent over to us. And again, that's the way, and I represent a district that is the general contractor for both programs. You want to strengthen hiring, supply chain, and facility growth. You need to have procurement stability. That's not what we're seeing from the Office of Management and Budget. I yield back.
Chair, now recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Turner.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for your written statement, and also thank you for your recognition of the importance of our nuclear deterrent, and specifically our investment in our modernization of our nuclear deterrent. We are behind, as you know, in the modernization of our nuclear stockpile. Your recognition of our investment in our triad and our command and control is incredibly important. Thank you also for your recognition of the importance of our future investment in missile defense and the importance that the Golden Dome will play. The Secretary General of NATO has recently made statements of his concern of Russia's future attempt to place an anti-satellite nuclear weapon into space. Specifically, he has said, "We are aware of reports that Russia is examining the possibility of placing nuclear weapons in space. This is very worrying. Space is also very important for our deterrence and defense, just as important as land, sea, air, and cyberspace. In recent years, space has become increasingly clouded, dangerous, and unpredictable. We know that competition in space is fierce. I recently had the opportunity to speak to him. He was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in my community as we were commemorating the 30th anniversary of the Peace Accords. His concern was that this is not getting worldwide enough of attention. We had General Saltzman recently in front of the committee. He has characterized that if Russia were to place an anti-satellite nuclear weapon into space, that would be day zero, that if that was put in space, that next day, that it would be irresponsible for us to count on space, that we would have to spend trillions of dollars and seek technology that we don't have to find solutions as an alternative to space, both commercially, for military, in really to redo what is really society today. As you know, it would affect both our nuclear deterrence, our efforts for missile defense, even our investments in Golden Dome. In this venue, obviously, we can't discuss all of the details of what we're doing, but I would ask if you would please confirm that this is a threat that is a priority to the Department of Defense, as it has been characterized by the Secretary General of NATO, and acknowledge that as it is a priority for us to prevent the deployment of nuclear weapons in space, and that it is a priority for us to work with our allies to uphold our commitment to the Outer Space Nuclear Treaty that prohibits the deployment of nuclear weapons in space. Sir.
Well, thank you for the question, sir. As you alluded to, there are a number of aspects to this question or answer that can't be discussed here, but I would underline our complete commitment to the space domain, to the hardening of the space domain, to prevention of escalations in the space domain, but most importantly, to the dominance of the space domain. I mean, that is, it is the future of how we see, it's the future of how we sense, it could be the future of how our adversaries fight and how we deal with that. So I think President Trump, yet again, was ahead of the curve when he created the Space Force in his first administration. People said we didn't need it. We are relying on it every single day now to ensure, alongside the Space Force and private enterprise, that we're delivering the capabilities we need that are resilient, that are redundant, that are capable of all aspects of all domain warfare, if necessary. And preventing adversaries from gaining an advantage is a huge part of how we look at space.
This threat is not classified. Russia's threat of deploying an an anti-satellite nuclear weapon in space is not classified. Obviously, this is a priority of the Department of Defense, and I just want your confirmation that this is a priority that you're tracking, and you too see that as a threat to the United States, and certainly to the United States and our space infrastructure, and certainly our whole national security infrastructure.
We track all potential escalations, yes, sir.
And while you're here, I just want to help you out because people try to twist your words. You are not confirming in your testimony today that at the Pentagon there are plans for invading or taking by force Greenland, correct? That is not your testimony today.
All my testimony is that the Pentagon has plans for any number of contingencies.
It is not your testimony today that there are plans at the Pentagon for taking by force or invading Greenland, correct? Because I'm sure as hell hope that it is not your testimony.
We look forward to working with Greenland to ensure that it is secured from any potential threats.
Excellent. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your opening statement, your concerns about Ukraine and the budget issues. Mr. Secretary, in your opening statement, you spoke to the issue of cutting waste and abuse at the Pentagon. I assume you intend to do that. Is that correct? Yes? No?
No, we have done that, sir.
All right. And therefore, it must be your responsibility. I want to bring to your attention a statement that the President made in early February. He said there is no reason for us to be building brand new nuclear weapons. We already have so many. You could destroy the world 50 times over, 100 times over. And here we are building new nuclear weapons. And they're building new nuclear weapons. We're all spending a lot of money that we could spend on other things that are actually, hopefully, much more productive. So I'd like to focus for a few moments on one of the most expensive programs at the Department of Defense, the Sentinel ICBM, which is to replace the Minuteman III. The cost of this program has exploded from $78 billion to over $141 billion, not including a new nuclear bomb for the Sentinel and the command and control systems, which would add somewhere $20 to $40 billion. All the while, we have a Minuteman III that can continue to provide the ground leg of the triad for at least 10 to 15 more years, should we cut the Sentinel program?
Well, President Trump is correct to point out that proliferation is very dangerous, but he has also, in his budget, ensured we fully fund the nuclear triad, every aspect of it, in a historic way. The Sentinel, as one leg of it, and that modernization is critically important. As you know, it faces a Nunn-McCurdy breach for being behind, and as a result, it has to be reviewed, but it's incredibly important. And so our budget does look at ensuring to...
Excuse me, sir. So you have made a decision to continue even though the review is incomplete?
The review is ongoing. The investments we've made allow us to continue should the review come out the way we hope it does.
You continue the Sentinel program even though the Nunn-McCurdy review is incomplete. I'd like now to move over to Ukraine. The chairman of this committee spoke very strongly about the Ukraine situation. And the necessity of the United States being strong in support of Ukraine. It's very, very clear that a review of what Mr. Putin has said over the last 2 decades, that he is determined to reestablish the Soviet empire, and Ukraine is the current step to achieve that. Ukraine's security is our security, my view,